So hi guys, welcome to Crazy Burger. So recently we've been looking at the A500 Mini, which is a little cool machine. But in this video we're actually going to be looking at some Amiga games that are actually better on the Commodore 64. Now a few years ago we actually already got the C64 Mini, and that's another cool little machine from the same company. But there are 10 games that we've picked that are actually better on the C64. Now you may not agree. If you don't, please just leave me a comment and let me know what you think. And without further ado, let's get started with the 10 games.
Thalamus.
Okay guys, now first game on the list is one of my all-time favourite C64 games, and that is Creatures. Now I absolutely loved it on the C64, and I was actually quite surprised to learn there was an Amiga version of this. Now I didn't know this for years, only found out maybe a few months ago, and I had a play at it and I was pretty much disgusted because I thought it was a terrible version considering it was Amiga. I mean, it kind of you think the graphics look a little better, but I don't know, I think it just looks ugly. I think the upgrades have probably made the game just look awful. It just doesn't look the same sort of cuteness. It's just pretty ugly. It just doesn't play quite as good either. But yeah, I just think the Commodore 64 version to this game is much better and far superior. Maybe I'm being a little bit biased, but I just think this is just awful, to be honest. Everything about it, the sound effects, the music, it's just much better on the Commodore 64, which sometimes you think that really shouldn't be the case, but in this case, I think it definitely is. And just for comparison, here is the C64 version. One of my all-time favourite C64 games. I just think it's definitely a better game. So number 2 is Flimbos Quest, which, I played this game recently on the Amiga and I just thought, oh, this is just pretty much like Creatures. It just isn't the same. I find it really hard to actually tell which creature I was supposed to kill to start with. They all kind of look the same. It just doesn't have that same feel. The creatures just seem to take forever to actually die. I don't know, it just doesn't seem to play as well as the C64 version. I feel that the colours seem to blend into each other and it's really hard to see bad guys and monsters that are sort of running about. I just found it really difficult to actually play, and for me I think the C64 version is definitely better on this occasion. So onto the C64 version, and for me it probably looks pretty much the same game, but I think it just plays a little bit nicer, it plays better, it's more clear what you're supposed to be doing. The graphics are just a little bit clearer as well, it's easier to see the monsters. I think they would just put too much colour into the Amiga version and it just blended, and you can see the monsters stick out a little bit better here. You can clearly see them coming, and you know what bad guy you need to kill, and it's just a much more fun game to actually play. Okay guys, on to the third game, which is Last Ninja 2. You could probably pick any of the Last Ninja games, to be honest with you. I think the C64 versions are probably better. I'm pretty sure System 3 probably was primarily a C64 programmer and developer, but I just felt their Amiga versions just weren't quite as good. They just seemed to be a little bit different. The controls just weren't as good. Even though the graphics, you could probably argue, were a little bit more detailed and a little bit nicer. But I still think the C64 version is much better. The handling of the characters is much easier. I don't know, I just feel that the Last Ninja 2 series, or the Last Ninja series in general, is definitely better on the C64. Now, right off for me, I think even the C64 version, the music is better. The handling just seems that more fluid and a little bit easier to actually control the character, and the moves just seem to come off easier. I don't know, maybe I'm being biased, but I just feel this version, the graphics are actually okay. I think there's probably just too much detail went into the Amiga version, but I think it just plays better. It's easier to actually do the combat in the C64 version, and it's a much more enjoyable game. Okay guys, number 4 on the list is Micro Prose Soccer, one of my all-time favourite C64 footy games. Absolutely brilliant top-down footy, but I've recently played this in the Amiga thinking, oh, it should be a better, maybe improved graphics, but it really doesn't look any better. It definitely doesn't play any better. There's been some changes to the gameplay slightly. It just doesn't seem to play well at all. It's very difficult to handle. It almost looks identical, to be honest, but there's just something that's just broken about the game for me. It's just not quite as good as the C64 version. The C64 version obviously has that great music as well. It just plays better, it's more enjoyable. I don't know, it's definitely better for me on the C64. Not sure what happened to the Amiga version, but for me this is definitely the one to play. So this one might be a little bit controversial. Paradroid 90, the remake for the Amiga from the C64 original. For me, I just find it's not as much fun to play. It's a lot more difficult. Yeah, it might actually look better, but the original version was a lot of fun. It was great to explore. With this one, I just found it really, really difficult to get into. So the C64 version, yeah, graphically it probably wasn't the most amazing looking game, but it had the playability, it was more enjoyable, probably wasn't as difficult, and the exploration was quite good fun to go around the ships. I just think it's a better game for me, even though it doesn't look great, it's definitely more playable. Okay guys, number 6 on the list is Arnie, which is a kind of a run and gun shooting game, and the Amiga version is pretty different to the C64 version. The Amiga version, you can see here, you've got a side-scrolling sort of run and gun game. And it's not a terrible game, but it's just not quite as fun and as playable as the C64 version. It does get a little bit tedious. The enemies just seem a bit sort of headless chickens. They're just running about. The AI is not particularly amazing, and it gets a bit tedious pretty quick. Whereas the C64 version sort of utilised a kind of a commando style perspective. You can see sort of top down, side scrolling sort of, and it was much more playable. Yeah, the graphics are a lot worse. There's no doubt the graphics aren't particularly great on this, but the playability is really good. I found playing this quite a lot back in the day, and this was a kind of cheap game at the time. It was like a $2.99, $3.99 game, sort of budget range, and it was really, really good fun to play. I really enjoyed it. I really think the C64 version is definitely better than the Amiga.
US Gold present from Sega. Outrun.
Okay, after that amazingly stupid intro, you think Outrun would be absolutely brilliant on the Amiga, but unfortunately it's really not a great version at all. It actually looks okay, the graphics are absolutely fine, but it's all about the handling in the game here. It just doesn't feel right. The responsiveness is pretty poor, and it's not enjoyable. It's such a shame because this is such a classic arcade game, whereas the C64 version, I'm not saying it's a brilliant game either, but I think it's got more playability, it's a little bit more fun, the handling is definitely a little bit better. It's graphically not amazing, but it's definitely more fun to play than the Amiga version, and it handles a lot better. Okay guys, if you didn't agree with the last driving game, you've got to agree with this one. Power Drift on the Amiga is an absolute mess of a game. I think they were trying to give it some kind of 3D perspective, and it really doesn't work. It just makes the game really difficult, hard to see, graphically it's all over the place. The cars and all that look nice, but when you start playing it, it's just absolutely horrible. It's very difficult. It just isn't a good game to actually play, which is a shame because Power Drift is such a classic. On the C64, however, it is absolutely brilliant.
Second lap.
Okay guys, C64 version, obviously graphically it's kind of a basic, it's okay for a C64 game, but it's all about the playability and the handling in this version. It is such a cracking game. I played this a lot back in the day and really loved it. Interestingly though, I think it's probably better played with a joystick, which is probably the same for a lot of games. Sometimes trying to play these games on a D-pad, it is a lot trickier to actually play. It's probably just a little bit too sensitive and was designed to be played with an actual joystick, but no doubt Paradroid in the C64 is much better than the Amiga version. The playability is just absolutely fantastic, an absolute cracking game. Okay, number 9 on the list, it's Hawkeye, and this is the Amiga version, and it honestly doesn't look like an Amiga game at all. Graphically, it's not any better than the C64 version. I think they've really done a very lazy port on this, and you're honestly better off just sticking with the C64 version. It looks pretty much similar. It's honestly, I think it's just a lazy port for me. You see the C64 version, it almost looks the same. Graphically, it's got a slightly different colour palette obviously, but it still looks the same, has that same playability, and it's, for me, I just stick with this. It's a little bit more enjoyable. So there's a little bit of colour bleeding when the graphics here and there, but for me, I prefer playing this version. Okay guys, last on the list, it's Paperboy. This might be the most controversial addition to this list, whereas Paperboy isn't actually a bad game on the Amiga at all, and it's probably closer to the arcade version than the Commodore version actually is, and it looks really nice, it plays okay. It's probably a lot harder than the Commodore 64 version, but there's just something about the Commodore 64 version that really drags me in. I feel it's a lot more playable, it's a lot more fun, it has cracking music, the graphics are okay. I don't know, I just prefer it, I don't know why. Maybe that is because I've played that version more, I don't know. It might mix opinions out there. I think a lot of people might prefer this version. Obviously Paperboy was pretty much ported to every format you can think of, and it's difficult to say what version is the best. Is the arcade the best version? It's really hard to actually say. But anyway, nothing wrong with this, but let's have a look at the Commodore 64 version as well. Okay, the Commodore 64 version had that great music, it had the great sound on it. Graphically, obviously it's not quite as close to the arcade version, it's sort of changed slightly, but the playability is absolutely fantastic. And I just absolutely love this version. It almost looks like an Atari game with the scores at the top and bottom there. But for me, it's brilliant. I really love it. The playability, and they just keep coming back that one more time. It has that I don't think the Amiga version actually has. Just my opinion. I think this is definitely a better version to actually play. Okay guys, that's my 10 games on the C64 that are better than the Amiga versions, in my opinion. If you disagree, please drop me a comment and let me know. Are there other C64 games out there that you think are better than the Amiga versions? I'm always interested to hear all your opinions. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and we'll catch you again in the next one. Bye for now.